Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 26 team in my 2025 NFL Deep Dive Series. It's the Indianapolis Colts. Make sure to leave a thumbs up. It helps pushes it out, in the YouTube algorithms. That stuff, doing a lot of talking these days. I'm kind of stuttering. The Colts are an interesting team. A lot of people expect them to probably be better than what they are. I think a lot of that revolves around the quarterback situation, which has been a quarterback controversy started here with the Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones situation. Shout out to Riley Leonard, who's sneakily in there as the number 3 quarterback right now. I would watch for him in training camp to make a bit of a splash. But a very good weaponry and offensive line put together here. If they figure out this quarterback situation, they're going to be a very dangerous team. And also the head coach Shane Steichen with Jim Bob Cooter for the offensive side of the football, they got a lot to work with here, and I think that this needs to be sort of a make or break season for them, and we'll get to that coaching staff later on. The defense is one where they have a lot of depth and just not very exciting, which you'll see as we cover the defensive grades coming up. It's like they got a sea of number 2s at every position, and there's going to be a lot of competition. There's going to be a nice rotation of the defensive line. There's going to be a nice rotation in the secondary. They got a lot of guys in there. They're just lacking that breakout star, and they're hoping that Leatu Latu, who they drafted last year, could hopefully be that guy on the defensive side of the ball. And we'll get to all that, but Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator, who was the head of the worst defense in the world last year in Cincinnati, maybe the change of scenery helps him, but it's a very young team and hopefully a very ambitious team. We saw the thing with Anthony Richardson where he was taking himself out because he was tired. That's not a good sign of a good culture. And when we get to the coaches here, the one thing that we have to talk about is how they're building and maintaining the culture, and that starts with the head coach. Lower on this, despite a little bit, like mediocre success of this team is the cultural issue that seems to be brewing in the organization through the roster. We saw it last year. I talked about it at the top with Anthony Richardson just checking out of a game because he's tired. That is a culture issue that is a problem in the locker room. Now, how you address that is he's created this quarterback competition that we'll get to shortly, but he seems to be looking for that quarterback that he was really brought in to mold. It was supposed to be Anthony Richardson. Maybe it's Daniel Jones, who he can pick up where Brian Daboll left off in 2022, in coordination with Jim Bob Cooter, who I actually really like as an offensive coordinator. He's my 14th ranked offensive coordinator for an A6 grade. A lot of experience. Heard his name passed around for head coaching jobs in the past, just never really came through. He isn't a groundbreaking offensive mind, certainly not to the level that Shane Steichen is viewed at, but I do think that he is a solid offensive coordinator to have if you have an offensive head coach who is one of in the upper half of the league of head coaches, which if Steichen can get this roster back on track, if he can take advantage of some of the talent levels that he has, if he can pick up the offensive line. They lost 2 really key starters that we'll get to a little bit later. And if he can elevate Jim Bob Cooter as a strategist, the play calling is something that I think will be up in the air throughout the year. And how they design an offense around Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. I feel like the offenses are going to be similar in that I think you can run the same type of offense with both of those guys to a degree. But it's going to be a tall task for these guys because they have so much talent to work with. And for all intents and purposes, getting the quarterback on track is the last missing piece for this team, and that falls directly onto these two. They do have a defense that's relatively talented that we'll get to, but they have Lou Anarumo as their defensive coordinator, and he's my 30th ranked defensive coordinator, gets a 70 grade. He got some head coaching buzz for a while. I never really understood it, watching those Bengals defenses. And then last year, that Bengals defense was one of the worst defenses in the NFL for the last decade and a half that I can think of, at least. It was so terrible. It single-handedly was the reason why the Bengals didn't make the playoffs last year. And in the Bengals, they win 8 games last year? Despite their defense, they were scoring like over 30 points a game at one point and still losing. Maybe the change in scenery with Lou Anarumo is the difference maker here. Sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes you stay somewhere a little bit too long. You get used to the same staff, the same head coach. Sometimes you need a different vision, a different culture to come into. Maybe that's what Lou Anarumo requires here. Is that I don't have much faith in it. I've always thought he was extremely overrated. And I think that he'll be a detriment to this defense, and a big reason why the talent level that they have may not actually come to fruition and see what it could truly be if it had a top 20 defensive coordinator, even like when they had Gus Bradley and all that. I think that would have been a much better person to have in this situation. And this is a group where they're on the hot seat. This is not a group that I think has much job security coming into this year. You know, Steichen has underachieved since taking over the head coaching job. So you're hoping that he can pick this up. And I think an early positive start is going to be the key to that. I don't know that he's necessarily a candidate to get fired mid-season. The changeover in ownership due to the death of Jim Irsay, I think, is significant. I think that when you have that, you're getting a much younger, more modernized look at things, where this new ownership, like, the girls might just show up and be like, halfway through the season, if you're not looking like you're somewhat in playoff position, you know, be around 500 by that trade deadline, or he could be gone, and there could be some type of in-house cleanup from the coaching staff standpoint, from a roster standpoint. There's some guys in there that could potentially get moved. But I think that if they do get going, then Shane Steichen, ironically, could be in line for an extension at the end of the year, because they do have so much talent that we're going to get to here. Jumping in here for an ad break, but I don't have any ads in this video, and that's because I need you guys to subscribe. If you haven't already, I need you guys to hit that thumbs up to push out to more people, to give them a chance to subscribe. We gotta get these numbers up. I put a lot of work in here, and I hope that you guys can help me out. You guys can, do me that solid and do me that favor by just hitting the thumbs up and the subscribe if you haven't already done it. And let's get back to the video. And this quarterback page is going to be a lot different than the other ones that you're going to see, because this is a true two-man race quarterback competition here. They're the 31st ranked group nonetheless, when you average the two out. Anthony Richardson, I do think, is the front runner. He's the one they invested the high pick in. He's the one that they've been building this offense, like the play calling, the strategies, and all that around for all this time. But he would come in as the worst starting quarterback in the league by grade. Daniel Jones gets a little bit of a boost over him. I do like Jones better than Justin Fields, so it kind of averages this out here to put them just slightly above what the New York Jets have that we just covered. But we'll have to start with Anthony Richardson. He is the major piece to the puzzle here, and as a deep ball thrower, he is phenomenal. And we knew that coming in. He got a lot of the Josh Allen comparisons coming into the league, where he threw a great deep ball, and then intermediate and short routes were kind of going to be a disaster early on in terms of his accuracy and being able to pinpoint these throws a lot better. And he just hasn't developed that in the time that he's played. He has had some injuries, hasn't really played the entirety of his first 2 seasons here by any means, but there really hasn't been much of a sign of him developing in a overly positive way. The play action hasn't been good. When kept clean, he's just about average. And under pressure, he's been absolutely terrible. And his big time throws to turnover-worthy plays, his adjusted completion percentage, they're all very poor statistical outputs here for Anthony Richardson. The intermediate and short areas of the field, I feel, is the most concerning, because you can only just whip the ball down the field so much. Teams are playing too high safeties on him. They're just playing a cover two man on him for the most part, and cover two, cover four, and it pretty much takes away all the strength that he has, and his inability to process the defense from the linebackers and the interior the nickel and the dime corners, and picking up robbers from the linebacker. He just can't figure that stuff out. And I don't know if it's the requirement of maybe changing over a quarterback coach, adjusting the strategy a bit more, maybe looking much deeper into what Brian Daboll did with Josh Allen in Buffalo and trying to mimic that more. You don't want to be a complete carbon copy, but when it's as comparable as they were and the results are very eerily similar to what we saw with Josh Allen in that rookie year in particular, there's got to be something to that and something to building that success. They have much better weapons around him overall than what Josh Allen had in Buffalo, so it can't really be that. Are they lacking like a true high ceiling weapon? Sure, but I mean, the balance across the board that they've provided for Anthony Richardson and the different types of skill sets, contested catch guys, true deep threats, little slot gadget guys, a good running back to work off of. It's just been one thing after another, where this was a very, very desirable situation for Anthony Richardson to come into. One of the best situations for him, considering where he was drafted inside the top 5. Usually these situations aren't that great, but man, he hit the jackpot here, and I think work ethic issues could come into play here. That wouldn't surprise me at all if that was a factor in why the development has sort of, stagnated there. We saw the effort concerns where I'm just tired, so I'm taking myself out of the game and on third down in the red zone and putting the backup quarterback in. It's just not signs of leadership. And I wonder how much behind the scenes the locker room has an issue with that, especially when you got some veterans in there like Kenny Moore, and you've got Braden Smith, Quentin Nelson, DeForest Buckner. There's a lot of veterans of this organization that are there that I wonder what it looks like behind the scenes in terms of holding Anthony Richardson accountable for all the problems that he has. And then on the other hand, you have Daniel Jones, who, in terms of effort and leadership, gets the exact opposite types of reports. Now, he's almost the exact opposite type of a player when it comes to throwing the ball. He's not a great deep ball thrower. His adjusted completion percentage just last year was 77.7%. So he's not an inaccurate quarterback by any means. I think that's something that Brian Daboll really unlocked with him, was a good, accurate, well-processed intermediate to short game with not a lot of big play potential with the arm. When he's kept clean, man, he's able to pick teams apart. He just wasn't kept clean all that much playing for New York because of all the offensive line issues they had. He was under pressure so often, and he didn't perform well under the pressure. He was very mediocre in the play action game. I think a lot of that had to do with the Giants trying to figure out what that running game even looked like and teams trying to respect it. Didn't make a lot of big time throws. Didn't really have a lot of big turnover worthy plays, but the lack of big time throws to turnover worthy plays ratio is a cause for concern here. Now, he's coming onto a team where he's playing with probably the best offensive line he's ever played with. He's playing with a top flight running back again, and we saw what he did with a healthy Saquon Barkley in that first year with Daboll. He played a great season. he's probably got the deepest weapons group he's ever had as well. You know, Malik Neighbors was probably the best talent he played with, and he barely played with them at all last year. Now he gets Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, and Josh Downs, and even Tyler Warren. So I think there's a real chance here that Daniel Jones is the starting quarterback in week 1, because for all the memes, when you really break it down, what he was dealing with in New York during his tenure there compared to what he has here in Indianapolis, is there a reason to believe Daniel Jones can't be a top 20 quarterback in the NFL this year? And I think if you are fielding a top 20 quarterback who's, you know, you go back to that 2022 season that he had, didn't turn the ball over a whole lot, was great at protecting the ball, just didn't make a lot of big time plays. Now, with Tyler Warren and Michael Pittman, there's some serious opportunities there for him to extend and play much more in the intermediate, that 10 to 20 yard area down the field. He's going to get a lot more time to throw the ball into those situations, you would assume, at least on average every play. So if Anthony Richardson does have the inside track here just because of the investment, but Daniel Jones has a legitimate shot to step up here and like a low-key comeback player of the year candidate. I think you could, if looking at the odds of what that could be, you put $5 on it. Put $5 on Daniel Jones winning comeback player of the year. I don't know what the payout would be. I feel like it would be at least in the hundreds. Low risk, high reward there. I would look for that to be a real possibility because, like I said, if Anthony Richardson comes out of the gate struggling early, then Shane Steichen's job is on the line here. Jim Bob Cooter's job is on the line. And they won't hesitate to make that switch at all. That's the reason why Daniel Jones was brought in, to give them that option to move away from Anthony Richardson if things just didn't work out early on, whether it be in camp or early on in the regular season. They also brought in Riley Leonard, the rookie, so they're all sort of different versions of the same player here. I think Riley Leonard can add. They don't have to really change the playbook all that much for Riley Leonard either, so I would watch out for him as somebody competing during the season as well, who could come in and end up being, a number 2 quarterback. And if this all completely falls apart, could end up probably starting a couple of games towards the end of the year if he is still on the roster. But it is a quarterback room that is very difficult to trust here, and it's just not something that is, it's more stressful than exciting, I would think, for Colts fans. You've been trying to find that guy from Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck, and now you're just sort of sitting here and you're looking at this quarterback room probably and going, like, close your eyes and hope for the best type of a deal. But as we get through this, I think you'll see my point of, you just need a top 20 performance out of these quarterbacks, out of one of these quarterbacks for the season, and you could be in a real great situation. It's just hard to bank on that because you can only go based upon what these players have shown, and what they've shown is just sort of, below average output. But when you look at what this weapons group is, it's my 9th ranked weapons group in the entire league, a top 10 group. And you look at some of the grades here, we got Pittman, we got Pierce, and we got Downs. They're the 3 top receivers on this team. They all do something a little bit different. They all play a little bit of a different style. They provide a nice little variety for Anthony Richardson and for Shane Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter as play callers. You look at Michael Pittman, he's the bigger bodied receiver. He's not this overly deep threat down the field. He's a good deep threat, but his work is in the intermediates. He's going to be your contested catch guy at 15 contested catches. He's a sure-handed guy, only had 3 drops, a 4.2% drop rate. You hope that you can complete more of his targets as the year goes on, get him in the end zone a little bit more. He only had 3 touchdowns on 808 yards. Did 3/4 of his work from the wide position. Did play a little bit of slot in there, but that's not the role that we're going to be seeing him in at all. An 81.8 passer rating when targeted, which, considering the quarterback play overall and totality, that's a good quarterback rating. I think that he still hasn't reached that upper echelon of wide receiver ones. He got drafted in the second round, maybe a little bit early, but performed really well since coming into the league. He just has sort of hovered around like a high-end number 2. He's almost this, like, a lesser T. Higgins in terms, like, T. Higgins is this, he'd be like a middle number 1 receiver, but like the highest end number 2. I feel like Pittman, if he was your number 2 receiver, would really speak to like it being, you got a top 5 weapons group here in that scenario. It's just not there, and you wonder if, because he works so well in the intermediate and the short, and that's a majority of where he operates, if having Anthony Richardson as the quarterback is a detriment to his career in terms of what he's producing on the field week to week. And if the change is made to Daniel Jones, that Michael Pittman wouldn't be the single biggest benefactor from that change because of where he's comfortable operating, the type of routes that he can run, the way he gets contested balls. That plays right into Daniel Jones's wheelhouse more so than Anthony Richardson's. But Alec Pierce, on the other hand, who last year had this great breakout season, 37 catches, 824 yards on 37 catches, 7 touchdowns. He only had 3 drops as well. 104.6 passer rating when targeted, the A+ deep. That was where he lived. He lived running down the field from the outside, beating corners and finding gaps in zone coverage and blowing past safeties. And that plays right into Anthony Richardson's style of game. So you have your two starting outside wide receivers here are a complete contrast to one another. And when you have 2 quarterbacks that are a complete contrast to one another, one of them is going to succeed a little bit more than the other. Now, a full season of Anthony Richardson, I would expect Alec Pierce to be the guy that really excels and blows up. If the change is made to Daniel Jones, Alec Pierce is probably, of the top 3 receivers on the team, going to see the most statistical downfall because, Pittman plays so well into what Daniel Jones would want to do. And then Josh Downs, as this little slot guy, took almost 85% of his snaps from the slot. That's another place where Daniel Jones really likes to operate, and not a spot where Anthony Richardson wants to operate. And he had 800 yards himself, 5 touchdowns, only 4 drops, a 97.8 passer rating when targeted. So for the betterment of the overall offense in terms of maybe, chipping away at defenses, you're not going to have these giant plays. The Daniel Jones, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs combination could really work out well in that favor. And then you have the Alec Pierce, Anthony Richardson duo, which would be the exciting, ticket-selling, highlight reel style offense that I think the fans would love a lot more, and the fans would allow themselves to be tricked into maybe being a better group, even if the more boring, for the lack of a better term, triplet group that could form with this offense produces better. You want to see the Alec Pierce touchdowns. That's really the highlights of what last season was Alec Pierce and those giant touchdowns that he was scoring on those just ridiculous plays where he's just burning everyone with that speed. Now, with these 3 guys, this is another reason why I feel Anthony Richardson needs to have the inside lead on the starting job, is because you're not going to be able to just teach Daniel Jones how to have arm strength all of a sudden. His arm strength is what it is. You can coach Anthony Richardson to be more accurate in the intermediate and short games, which does create a much higher ceiling overall for the offense. So that's another reason why, just with the way this group is set up, and what they could potentially be with the skill set of Anthony Richardson. That's why I really think that he's going to be the starter, even though he's probably not the best passing quarterback in the room overall. They drafted Adonai Mitchell last year. I don't know if it was in the anticipation of losing Michael Pittman. They might still at some point. Adonai Mitchell is as good of a wide receiver for potentially as you could have. I think Anthony Gold and him are pretty much neck and neck though, but Mitchell's got a higher ceiling, obviously. Coming out of Texas, had some first round buzz there for a while. Laquan Treadwell is just your gadget player, been passed around a little bit throughout the league. Ashton Doolin, you're going to see play some special teams and maybe get a little bit of replacement level work. And then there's Tyler Warren, the rookie tight end who they took 14th overall in this last draft. Just an absolute receiving monster. Played 47% of his snaps out of the slot, 33% as a true inline tight end. So I think he really works out both ways here. He's going to give you some stuff in the run game as well as a blocker. His contested catches were phenomenal. He dominated in every level of the field. A sure-handed receiving tight end. 3 drops, a 2.8% drop rate. Amazing number there. It's hard to find anyone with a better one than that. 104 catches, 1,230 yards, 8 touchdowns. His catch radius and his athleticism is going to be a tremendous asset to helping, I believe, develop the intermediate and short game of Anthony Richardson, and would be something that Daniel Jones would take advantage of wholeheartedly if given the opportunity to play as well. The mismatch issues that he could cause, the way you can line him up in the slot, move him in motion, move Josh Downs in motion. You could, for all intents and purposes, line Warren up outside. He did take 14% of his snaps last year at Penn State from an outside wide receiver position. Now, that's probably something you want to execute maybe more in the red zone. You get Pittman and Warren sort of lined up wide there. That's your fade routes. That's your contested catch in the end zone. And I think they can have a lot of success when they get inside the 7-yard line with a guy like Warren and Michael Pittman as some options there. You just need some, again, better accuracy from your quarterback overall. Some of the depth they had at tight end has sort of been sitting there for a while. Drew Ogletree and Jelani Woods have all gotten some starts over the years. Never really excelled and truly established themselves as number 1 tight ends. They had plenty of opportunities to do so. Never did. So it's not like there's a whole lot of question marks in my estimation around these two players. They kind of are what they are. They showed what they are. And they're just backup types at this point. You can come in for some 12 personnel when you want to get heavy, run some inside zone with Taylor and Anthony Richardson. And Taylor's going to give you some really good stuff as a third down receiving back as well. Not really any type of depth to speak of, though, behind Jonathan Taylor in a lot of senses here, especially in the passing game. So the depth is really good here. They're going to have a good, healthy rotation at wide receiver. They're going to be able to mix guys around, create mismatch issues, make the defense do a lot of things pre-snap, and hopefully use this group to their advantage to maybe mask some of the issues they're going to have behind center, at the very least early in the season. So here's the other uniqueness about everything with this running game is you have Jonathan Taylor, who gets a 90 grade for me, the 9th best running back room in the league. And then the quarterback boost, the quarterback bonuses that come here from Anthony Richardson and from Daniel Jones are pretty significant as well. Now, Anthony Richardson, maybe people are thinking that's a little bit low. And the only reason he gets that 85 grade tied for 5th is because it's hard to trust that he's going to stay healthy all year and that he's going to truly be able to be the running back threat that he's capable of, because the team's not going to call as many design runs with the fear of him getting hurt continuously. You want him to be healthy and you want him to have the time to develop that throwing ability. So Daniel Jones, though, though a lesser athlete, I feel has shown that he can be a great contributor in the run game as well, you're also worried about injuries from him too. So two quarterbacks that could really add a lot in the run game suffer from lower grades due to the just lower expectations of them in terms of their injuries and whatnot. But Jonathan Taylor bounced back really well last year, had 11 touchdowns, 17 big runs, 71 first downs, 36 missed tackles forced. He did have 4 fumbles, which was, you don't want to see that. You want to bring those numbers down. 813 yards after contact, 4.7 yards per carry, 1,400 yards in total. Almost 50-50 balance of zone and gap runs, which is a really good asset to have. The fact that they can run that so successfully, run it that often, and have that nice little mixture in the bag of tricks for the run game. Just being able to turn around, hand off, do some wide zone, or do some gap quarterback reads, power reads, and all that. To have that at their disposal really elevates the overall capabilities of the offense. And kind of like what you saw with the Jets, this allows them to maybe keep some games a lot closer and give them chances to win games that maybe they, quote, shouldn't on paper, because they're going to be able to run the ball really successfully, and they're going to be able to shorten games, keep the defense off the field, keep the defense fresh, and maybe put opposing offenses back them into a corner where they got to maybe play a little bit more aggressive because they get less time on the field, and that's going to allow opportunities for the defense to take advantage of that. So this is a really good asset for this team to have as they're trying to develop the passing aspect of their team. Goodson, Herbert, Ahmed, rookie DJ Giddens, they're not going to see significant amount of time, and if they do, that's a problem, because that'll mean Jonathan Taylor is either sucking really bad or is injured, and neither one of those is a good scenario for this team. The one thing this team has had that's been really good over the last 5, 6, 7 years has been the offensive line. Really, it was a lesson learned by how bad the offensive line performed when Andrew Luck was there. Pretty much retired him early with how bad they were. But ever since then, they've made it a point to really develop this group, drafted really well, and they're tied for 10th in pass blocking, 5th in run blocking. And it starts with the breakout season that we saw from Bernard Ryman, the left tackle, who in his rookie year was like, maybe wasn't ready to play. But man, did he have a great performance last year. 471 snaps, he had 4 sacks, 20 pressures, but performed really well. He was definitely a starting caliber left tackle, and he's looking like he's going to take another step forward this season and reestablish himself. You're hoping that this grade can be boosted by a couple of points come next season. He's been a phenomenal developmental piece, picked in the 3rd round just a couple of years ago to be the replacement to Anthony Costanzo, who retired. One of the sure things about him is that he also played really well in the run. Got an A grade in zone blocking on 385 snaps, a C+ grade in gap. But Ryman, he's like this. He's more an athletic type. You run some wide zone with him. That's where he's really going to thrive in the run game. Running the gap stuff, he doesn't really have the best play strength, especially if he's trying to take on a more powerful defensive end in the run game. He's going to struggle a little bit with that. But being able to use the athleticism, getting out in space, and that's going to be where he's really going to be an asset in this run game when they do take those runs out to the left side. Then they have the veteran, their best offensive player still to this day, Quentin Nelson, who just hasn't dropped off, it seems. He's just the guy every year. Took 608 pass blocking snaps last season, only gave up 3 sacks. He did a lot of work one-on-one. Ryan Kelly, when he was the center, would usually kick out, help out Will Fries. Quentin Nelson was sort of relied on to be a one-man show, and he did phenomenal work there for an inside player. Did take 10 penalties, though, which you're not excited about. You're hoping that he can tighten that aspect of his game up this season. And then as a run blocker, again, one of the best. Another A in zone. C in gap. I think that's sort of between him and Bernard Raymond. That's where you are seeing that this team much better in zone than in gap, even though they run gap a lot, as we saw with Jonathan Taylor's carry split there. So seeing them go to a much more zone heavy run game could be extremely beneficial for them. And I think that also depends. Again, I keep going back to who the quarterback is. I think a more zone blocking will be more advantageous for Daniel Jones than it would Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson, you're going to see a lot of that gap power quarterback option plays. That's more within his skill set. Daniel Jones, you like to get that zone blocking, get him out in space if you're going to have designed runs for him. That might play right into the skill set here of this group. Tanner Bortolini taking over full-time as a center from Ryan Kelly, who's gone. Matt Goncalves replacing Will Fries. Both of those guys went to the Minnesota Vikings in the offseason. So you're hoping that these guys who you did draft, who you have been developing, can step in and be good replacement level guys for who you lost, who were two really strong veteran players. But again, in the pass blocking, they're not great pass blockers, but I think you're going to see a lot of sliding Bortolini to the right side to help Goncalves out, which I think will help the overall offensive line. Then you got Braden Smith at right tackle. He's sort of the stalwart here, him with Quentin Nelson. I think they were drafted in the exact same year, actually, if I'm not mistaken. But they've been stalwarts there. He's always been a solid middle-of-the-pack right tackle at worst. As he's aging a little bit, he'll hopefully settle into what these grades are right here, which probably makes him overall maybe like the 14th, 13th best right tackle in the league overall, which is a really good floor to have, especially because he can really do it all himself. The depth is interesting. Blake Freeland drafted last year. Doesn't look like he's good enough to get on the field at a BYU. Luke Tanetta seems to be a better option right here as a third tackle. You got Dalton Tucker and Danny Pinter who are going to be competing for that fourth interior offensive lineman spot. And you got Jalen Travis, who, I think could probably get some inside consideration along with some tackling consideration. Didn't really get into him all that much. But in terms of what he can bring early on, I wouldn't say it's much of a contribution at all. The best bet would be, play Luke Tanetta or put in Danny Pinter and kick Goncalves out to tackle, depending on what you get if you need to replace one of the tackles due to injury. But as a starting five group, they got everything in piece to make sure to raise the floor of this overall offense, keep them productive, and provide opportunity and time for Anthony Richardson to process the defense and to make smart decisions and to make sure he can step into his throws, be accurate, because they got all the weapons in the world and the offensive line needs to make sure that the quarterbacks can go out there and find them. So overall, it is my 22nd ranked offense, 14th offensive coordinator. It's 29th pass offense, the third best rush offense. So there is that going for them. The quarterback situation is a detriment here. When you're top 10 in offensive line, you're top 10 in weapons, and you're coming out 29th, that's a sign of a quarterback issue here. With that said, like I did bring up, get a top 20 performance, this offense could be phenomenal, and that's where it's really going to boost themselves up, because if they can get this passing offense into the top 20, then this offense becomes 15th at that point in the league maybe, and that's a winning equation there for the Colts, especially in the division that they're in, where there's still a lot of question marks hovering around. Now let's get to the Lou Anarumo run defense And like I said at the top, there's a lot of depth here. It's just somehow also very unexciting just because of the lack of top end talent that exists outside of the interior defensive line, which we're going to get to it right here with the defensive line, and we'll start with. In the defensive line, you have a tale of two different stories, so to speak, I guess. 29th in pass rush, but number 2 in run defense. Let's start with Laiatu Latu, last year's first round pick. Balanced rookie season performance, had 4 sacks. He was 27th in win percentage. Took 377 pass rush snaps, just over 600 snaps overall. He was a linebacker, then he was an edge rusher. It's sort of the same path that we're seeing Jalen Walker take this upcoming season from Georgia to the NFL. You know, with that year at Georgia where he played some more edge. Latu's last year at UCLA played some more edge, but was used to playing like an off-ball linebacker role. So playing just a more traditional 4-3 defensive end is a adjustment for any player. I like Latu to continue to develop. I think that he can still be a quality player here. His contributions in the run game can still be something, though there are better options out there. I like him to be much more of a rotational piece on early downs. When you get Samson Ebukam, you got the rookie JT Tuimalau, who I was really high on coming into the last season. Just didn't work out there. Didn't reach the levels of a pass rusher that we were hoping for. But as a run defender, he could get a lot of early down work as a rookie. And Samson Ebukam with just more balance as well, sort of like a poor man's version of what they got in Kwity Paye, who I just find is a little bit better overall as they look to develop his pass rushing ability that hasn't really turned out. But I could see an early down situation where you might have an Ebukam and a Kwity Paye, and then passing situations, see Latu sub himself in for maybe Kwity Paye. But I think you want to give Kwity Paye as many opportunities as possible here before you make a true decision on whether or not he's sticking around or not. You did draft JT Tuimalau for a reason. He sort of comes in as an absolute equivalent to what you have in Kwity Paye, which, you know, maybe I'm a little bit higher on JT than most, but I do feel like you would get the exact same production in the exact same situations from those two players. Is Kwity Paye got the higher upside? At this point, it's hard to say, right? At this point, it is hard to say. It's not like he just got into the league. He's been there a while. He's sort of just been good enough to keep his job. And we'll see how that develops. You know, Tyquan Lewis is still a guy out there who I think you'll see as a starting defensive end, at least on early downs as well. They got a nice rotation of defensive ends, just kind of like the wide receiver room, lacking that high number one, that upper echelon player for that edge group. And I think it drags things down. Like, you have Latu, you have Tyquan Lewis, Ebukam, JT, Kwity Paye. Like, these are all good number 2 edge players. No number 1s to speak of. And you're hoping that Latu, being the highest investment in the room currently, that he breaks out here in his second year. Not even close to the same issues with the interior defensive line, which is really the star of this group. Helps raise this group up, especially in the run game. And it starts with the nose tackle, Grover Stewart, who, even as a pass rusher, is not that bad for an interior defensive lineman. For a nose tackle, I think he produces really well for you. He gets 3 batted balls, 9 quarterback hurries. He had 4 sacks, 15 pressures, 86 in win percentage, but he's a nose tackle. Not exactly Dexter Lawrence expectations out here for him. And what he really brings is a strong run defense. 41 tackles, 25 assists Missed tackles only 5. He was 14th in stop percentage, forced a fumble. He just is a great space eater for the interior defensive line. Takes on those double teams and opens up opportunities for his teammate DeForest Buckner, who is probably the best overall player on this defense still to this day. Ever since he was acquired from the 49ers, 7 sacks, 9th in win percentage amongst interior defensive linemen last year. Took some 3 technique and 4 eye technique snaps there. His height and his size and his length are such assets that it's almost as if it's hard for him to ever really fall off as a player in terms of his quality, because he's always going to have those traits to him. So as long as there's not like some devastating injury, he's going to be good like this for ever. It's like a Calais Campbell thing, where Calais Campbell's still a high-end player despite his age. All he really loses is the snap count, to keep him fresh there. Because even in run defense, man, DeForest Buckner, he was 9th in stop percentage amongst interior defensive linemen. Like, this is as good of a 3-down interior defensive lineman as there is in the entire league here. Did miss 10 tackles. That's a 16% missed tackle rate. That's something you want to bring down, but also not a lot of depth. Neville Gallimore is a decent number 3 situational rotational piece. You did draft Tim Smith, who can come in on early downs and bigger sets, goal line situations. Adeto Adebayor, an undersized interior defensive lineman, oversized defensive end. He's almost a square peg in a round hole for this defense. I think he'd be much better served as like a 3-4 defensive end, more so than this role that he sort of has to carve out here that doesn't make sense for his size and his traits or anything like that. It was sort of a weird situation for him to get drafted into that hasn't worked out, and that is unfortunate. And I think that he could be somebody who is on the chopping block, and I would expect that if there was going to be an interior defensive lineman that's removed, if they kept only 4, that he would be the one that would be gone. But I think there would be a really good market for him out there during training camp. So hopefully, if they're going to make that decision, they make it now to give him a chance, because I think he can still be a player in the league based upon his abilities. The linebackers have become quite the weak spot for this team. They got Zaire Franklin, but overall tied for 28th in coverage, 23rd in run defense. Zaire Franklin's your number 1 linebacker. He's never really played with the talent level of a number 1 linebacker. He's always sort of just been a good number 2. He was a good combination with Bobby Okereke when they had him. EJ Speed really stepped up last year. They lost him. So he's sort of just hovering. I guess, you want almost somebody else here to break out. And you're going to have opportunities on early downs from Seguna Luby, who did pretty well when called upon. But in terms of pass coverage, absolutely god-awful. Then you have Jalen Carlos, who's going to be probably the guy that they want to lean on the most. I kind of like Alubi better, because maybe you can just position him in pass coverage. He can develop that a little bit. Carlos is the best pass coverage linebacker they have. It's just hard to see where they're going to have a lot of success here. They drafted Hunter Wohler, who's a converted safety, so I don't know what you're going to get from him, if anything at all, in this year. It sort of was a draft reach for me, from my perspective. But Zaire Franklin, he was targeted 76 times, gave up 66 catches, 668 yards. He had 2 interceptions, so there's that. He allowed 3 touchdowns, 3 pass breakups, but pretty much if you targeted him, you were advancing, you were getting down the field at least 10 yards for the first down. Didn't take a lot of penalties, so he's not really sticky. You almost maybe want to see the penalties go up a little bit. Maybe playing a little bit more aggressive would help his overall production and have a net positive to his performance on the field in terms of this pass coverage. And then when you get him as a run stuffer, he's a good starter. 115 tackles. He did have 11.6 missed tackle percentage. He was 35th in stop percentage. So he's a good starter. But again, he's your number 2 linebacker. If he's your number 2 linebacker, you're happy. But he's your number 1. He's the Mike. He's the green dot. I'm just not confident that this linebacker group isn't going to be a detriment. They are going to rely so much on what we just covered with the front 4 and that interior in particular to help them out. They're going to be hopefully doing much more cleanup duty than anything else when it comes to their performances this year. But if that interior defensive line gets locked up by a good interior offensive line and the running lanes start to open up, that's where the Colts are really going to get taken advantage of, I believe, here. Because if you get caught with Jalen Carlos on the field and during a run play, watch out. Or, you get caught with a play action pass and a drag route gets run just behind these linebackers. They're not going to be in the right spot to make that stop. So this is something that Lou Anarumo really needs to work on. He does have a good history of developing linebackers in Cincinnati above some of the detriments that they had there. There was Logan Wilson. Jermaine Pratt did have some good years. So there is something to Lou Anarumo's ability as a defensive coordinator when it comes to linebackers. It's just he's got hopefully some moldable people here, and they're going to need to, drastic improvements are going to be made. That depth is a nightmare. That it's hard to get over. There's just not a lot of high-end talent for this second level. And I feel like the exact opposite is to be said about the defensive backs. They're sort of reminiscent of what we covered with the wide receiver and tight ends and the pass weapons. The receiving weapons is they got a lot of depth here and some really good balance. They brought in Travarius Ward, who for all intents and purposes had a down year last year, but God bless him and all the things that he's been through. You're hoping that the change of scenery, this will allow him to bounce back and get back into football. Everyone would understand if he couldn't and if he didn't. But I still think that even last year with all the distractions and everything, he was still a good starter. C in man, C plus in zone. He didn't give up a lot of receptions based on the targets that he had. He did give up 5 touchdowns. He had 4 pass breakups. The 119.1 passer rating, though, that's the elephant in the room here. But I do think that he still has the ability to bounce back, because if he does bounce back, he's a top 10 cornerback in the NFL. He's proven that over the years, Kansas City and San Francisco. So if they can unlock that with him, if maybe the pass rush can step up a bit and not sort of leave these guys hanging out to dry, Travarius Ward can step up, be a true number 1. If he can be a true number 1, that opens up the number 2 corner spot, where you're going to see some competition here between Jalen Jones and Samuel Womack, who are coming off of good seasons themselves. That's where that competition for that second outside corner spot is going to be, and both of them are in a position to be a solid cornerback 2 for them. Almost the exact same in terms of what their production can provide you. I think Womack had a little bit of a better year. I kind of like what he brings a little bit more to this 15th ranked pass coverage. Then you got the veteran Kenny Moore, who steps up in the run. He's a great slot, a great nickel, 572 snaps from the slot. Terrible in man coverage, doesn't have that athleticism. He's much more of like a physical, hard-nosed, almost like the archetype of what you want a slot nickel corner to be. He's got the little stocky frame. He's not afraid to hit people, but he plays much better in the zone, where he can, play with anticipation and instincts more so than trying to run around chasing a speedy slot receiver. If he gets stuck in those situations, that's really not ideal for him. He gave up 7 touchdowns last year as well, 5 from the slot. He did have 2 of his 3 interceptions from the slot, 387 yards from the slot, he only gave up 100 yards on 11 catches from playing outside corner. So, I mean, that's a hell of a performance for a receiver for a game, I guess. But spread out over 243 snaps, that's not bad at all. So how they use him and how they execute his skill level here, this is Lou Anarumo had a similar player in Mike Hilton in Cincinnati. So he knows how to get the best out of these true slot, true nickel corners who don't have the high-end athleticism but are good physically and have good zone instincts. Julius Brents, David Long Jr., Corey Ballantyne, and the rookie Justin Wally, who they drafted. It'll be interesting to see how those guys work themselves in with really the top 4 corner spots really worked out here. It feels like there's 4 guys competing for 1, maybe 2 at most roster spots. Then you move to the safeties, and you got Nick Cross, who tons of balance here. 79 pass coverage grade, 83 run grade. Very solid overall player. Had a lot of balance in his snap count last year. 489 box snaps, 418 true free safety snaps with 192 plays from the slot. A B- in man. C in zone. He was kind of susceptible to losing guys on crossing routes and whip routes, and didn't play with a lot of anticipation in zone. Was much better when he was using his athleticism and man coverage against some tight ends and some running backs and some slot receivers, especially in like a dime package. He did pretty well. Gave up 6 touchdowns. That was the thing. They gave up some serious touchdowns here as a starting group. So it was a lot of high risk, high reward, hit and miss style play from the secondary last season. So carrying this in, maybe the change of environment with Lou Anarumo can fix some of that. But I think Anarumo is going to look at Nick Cross, and he's going to see a lot of what Jesse Bates could have been in Cincinnati and what he's turned into in Atlanta, where you can sort of play him anywhere. And I think Nick Cross, his performance of being able to play him anywhere is going to be really advantageous to making quarterbacks on the opposing team have to just constantly be doing pre-snap checks and doing more than one at a time. Usually you're checking, linebackers, where the true defensive, the best edge rusher is, so to speak, what the personnel is and all that. But to have to identify where Nick Cross is, where he's playing, and have to study him in particular and figure out what his tendencies are, because he does play everywhere, that's a huge advantage, and he plays well in all those positions. They brought in Cam Bynum from Minnesota, who I think is a good complement to what they have in Nick Cross. Rodney Thomas is the only other safety depth of note, so it'll be interesting to see like these other corners, like maybe like a David Long Jr., Justin Wally. Look at how maybe they can convert to safety, maybe be a third safety out there. It'll be interesting to see how that all sort of works out for this defensive backs group, but a good group, unexciting, very unexciting, but definitely something that's going to help the production of this defense, and it's a good group to have this kind of depth with. Again, like the weapons group, they're extremely similar, and if we can get some breakout guys in here, then it skyrockets the potential of what this team could be. So overall, it is still a 27th ranked defense, 26th in pass defense. They're the 30th defensive coordinator, 7th in run defense. A very good run defense team, but again, kind of like the offense, they are kind of carbon copies of each other. They're lacking in quarterback and in pass rush. They're strong with the weapons and very deep with the weapons and very deep with the defensive backs. And then, the linebackers sort of mix in there as an issue as well, just lacking that depth along with the defensive line. So the front 7, tons of questions there. They do have the strength of schedule for 4-6-4, 25th in the league. 7.5 wins is the Vegas projection. I think it's a push. I think the schedule plays in their favor quite a bit in a lot of spots. You know, they got the 2 games against Tennessee, the 2 games against Jacksonville. They get Miami early in the year at home. They get the Raiders and the Cardinals at home. You know, they catch Seattle late in the year, where who knows what that team is going to really work out to be, what Sam Darnold's going to be in that group. Do they have the depth on the offense to sustain throughout a whole season without falling off if they catch one rough, significant injury? So there's a lot of potential here with this Colts team. If they can, and you see those games that are pushes, for me, the range really is, they got 3 wins on here. They could have 10. I think 10 is their ceiling here, and that they get 10 wins from me if Anthony Richardson can step up the intermediate to short game, get himself to like what would be the equivalent of like a C plus B minus grade for the intermediate to short route. I think that would be a drastic improvement for him, and I think it would raise the team up, and they could potentially win 10 games. But if he doesn't step up, then it could be a rough year of them losing some close games just because of their inability to make that final drive through the air and pick apart defenses. They're going to be sitting way back on them and pick them apart 5 to 12 yards at a time. Something Anthony Richardson still needs to prove he's capable of doing. So again, the overall rank 26th here, 78.45 overall score. 26th ranked head coach, 22nd offense, 27th defense. Lots of potential, lots of growth. Just, again, missing in some key position groups that drag down the overall team. And there you have it, my number 26 team in my 2025 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Indianapolis Colts. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a thumbs up in and a comment in the comment section below. And subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you guys with the next video next time.